Topless, mermaids, fantasy waterfalls, and boobs played for laughs. These movies might have landed a PG rating, but they've also managed to slip in a little more skin than you might expect. As an edgy comedy with lots of adult themes and plenty of frank sex talk, 16 Candles doesn't feel like a family movie. And there's one scene that's wholly inappropriate for younger audiences. It happens when Sam spies on classmate Carolyn Mumford because she's jealous of her popularity and her stunning figure. The scene takes place in the school showers, and there's a long, lingering shot of a naked Carolyn. A truly family-friendly film popular with kids and adults, Splash was rightly rated PG. Though there are some moments that get a little close to the line, most of it is innuendo. But there are several flirtations with nudity that honestly seem totally unnecessary. In several scenes when Madison is growing accustomed to human society, she's shown unclothed, with her long hair often used to obscure her breasts. But on at least one occasion when she's swimming in a tank at an aquarium, her naked top can be seen, albeit briefly. Why the filmmakers didn't give her something to wear, a la Ariel in The Little Mermaid, is anyone's guess. Even more perplexing, Splash is a Disney film, and decades later, the studio used CGI to hide at least some of the nudity before it was added to Disney+. Spoof movies burst onto the scene as their own genre in the early 80s with the now classic Zucker Brothers Airplane. The pair's later films would mostly be rated PG-13, allowing for nudity and more explicit depictions of sex and violence. But once again, Airplane predated the PG-13 rating. The movie's wacky humor feels pretty safe for all ages, and most of its more adult gags are likely to fly right over the heads of kids who are watching. Nevertheless, there's at least one moment that's impossible for children to ignore: a shot of the ample bosom of a random woman. And when we say you can't ignore it, they're literally in your face. During a chaotic scene where screaming passengers run this way and that, a completely naked woman runs into frame from out of nowhere. For a moment, her breasts are practically pressed against the lens, and to make it even more egregious, the shot is all boobs, no waist, no head. Kramer vs. Kramer might be one of the most acclaimed legal dramas of all time. Released in 1979, it stars Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep as Ted and Joanna, a married couple going through a bitter divorce. Caught in the middle is their young son Billy, over whom they battle for custody. The film took home 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and trophies for both Hoffman and Streep. Kramer vs. Kramer isn't a very scandalous film, and its PG rating probably makes sense. But there are a couple of moments where we see a lot more of one of the film's stars than you might expect. It's not Streep or Hoffman though, but supporting actor Jo Beth Williams, who plays Phyllis, Ted's co-worker with whom he has a one-night stand. Getting up in the middle of the night during their rendezvous, a stark naked Phyllis bumps into little Billy. She tries to awkwardly cover up with her hands, but we see everything. The 1970s brought us some of cinema's most groundbreaking sci-fi classics, including the dystopian adventure Logan's Run, which is set in a future where the population is euthanized at the age of 30.
Keeps everything in balance. One is terminated, one is born. Simple, logical, perfect.
The film follows Michael York's Logan and his companion Jessica, played by Jenny Agutter, as they try to escape their artificial biodome and certain death. They want to find a mythical safe haven called Sanctuary where it's said they can live out their natural lifespans in peace. It sounds grim, but while Logan's Run has some dark themes, it's a colorful adventure story and the PG rating seems about right. Nevertheless, Agutter's costume leaves little to the imagination, and there is one point where she takes everything off as she changes clothes.
Let's take our clothes off first before they freeze on us.
Also in the film, it's a surrealistic scene involving a group of nude men and women engaged in a kind of sensual dance meant to symbolize sex. It's hardly explicit and it suits the movie's tone and themes. Shadows cover up much of the nudity, but it could provoke some awkward questions from your kids. Beastmaster was one of several sword and sandal adventures released in the early 1980s. The film starred Mark Singer in the role of a warrior named Da, who can communicate with animals and uses his powers to stop a diabolical madman. The film's cast also included model and Charlie's Angels alum Tanya Roberts, a slave girl Kiri. At one point, Kiri and another woman swim topless at the mouth of a waterfall. But while some parents may not have minded the relatively tame non-sexual skin showing, a later scene goes a bit further. In a very short love scene, Kiri fully disrobes and embraces Da with a passionate kiss. Before she turns to him though, the audience gets a glimpse of everything Roberts has to offer in an unexpectedly sexy moment that's out of place given the movie's PG rating. Somebody must have liked Tanya Roberts in Beastmaster because just 2 years later, she returned to the sword and sandal genre, but this time she was playing the title role. Sheena is an action-adventure film based on the classic comic book Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. In the 1984 live-action adaptation, Roberts battles evil with her sidekick reporter, Vic Casey. Throughout the film, Sheena fights her enemies while wearing a tattered rawhide bikini, and even though Roberts is a heroine, filmmakers couldn't resist the opportunity to show her naked. As in Beastmaster, Roberts is once again bathing in a natural spring, but this time she's completely bare. And in a very un-PG choice, it's an extended scene that's long enough to make her stalwart sidekick super uncomfortable, as any parent who brought their kid to the movie would probably be when the naked woman shows up for a really long bath. Just before the Beastmaster arrived, there was Dragonslayer, a 1981 fantasy starring Peter MacNicol. It tells the story of a 6th century kingdom besieged by an ancient dragon. To keep its hunger at bay, the king has been sacrificing virgin women to the beast, but a sorcerer's apprentice believes he has what it takes to put an end to the reign of terror.
A dragon, fire and stench. It is evil.
Most of the film is focused on action and adventure, with plenty of fantasy violence that never gets too graphic. But there is one moment when we get a glimpse of both male and female forms with nothing on. It comes when the young apprentice finds himself in a pool of water and decides to take a swim in the nude, joining a young man named Valerian who's already there, having had the same idea. When he dives beneath the water, we see both men are stark naked, though the murky water obscures most of their naughty bits. What we do see, however, is that Valerian is really a woman, a rare case of nudity actually being important to the plot. The 1975 Stanley Kubrick film Barry Lyndon, based on a novel by William Makepeace Thackeray, is set in 18th century Ireland, where Barry, played by 70s sex symbol Ryan O'Neal, seeks to marry up by wooing a wealthy widow. Throughout the film, Kubrick explores the decadent lifestyle of the upper class, including the private life of noblewoman Lady Lyndon, played by Marisa Berenson. We see her expansive estate, her royal carriages, and of course, her many servants. Although the film isn't as controversial as Kubrick's previous one, A Clockwork Orange, there is a nude scene featuring Lady Lyndon. In keeping with many other entries on this list, it's not a sex scene and involves Lyndon in the bath. With Barry Lyndon not likely to be a kid magnet, the nudity is less awkward, though the story could have been told just as effectively without it. Few sci-fi movies have been remade as many times as the 1956 classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers. In 1978, the first remake hit theaters, starring Donald Sutherland as a public official who uncovers a sinister alien conspiracy to replace humans with emotionless doppelgangers. While the film isn't all that graphic, it's a creepy, disturbing story that provides plenty of scares based on its dark tone alone. For that reason, it's really not an all-ages film, which is probably why the filmmakers felt comfortable showing one of the stars in the buff. At one point, an alien replicant of scientist Elizabeth Driscoll, played by Brooke Adams, is seen fully nude. More upsetting than the nudity, though, is the cold nature of the replicant's walk and her eerie gaze, which is enough to send chills down even the steeliest of spines. The Bounty, released in 1984, is based on the remarkable true story of the mutiny aboard the HMS Bounty. It starred Mel Gibson, Anthony Hopkins, Laurence Olivier, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Liam Neeson. Early in the story, the ship stops in Tahiti, and the crew goes ashore to enjoy the sights and sounds of the island, and also its women. During the sequence, nudity is fairly prevalent, with a number of topless women parading around the screen. But it's not just the indigenous characters calmly walking around in the buff. There's also a steamy sex scene between Mel Gibson's Fletcher Christian and one of the native women, whom he takes as his island bride. Though it never gets too raunchy or graphic, the scene plays out with little modesty, as the two young stars roll around naked in a romantic moment. It may not come as a shock to learn that an old B-movie contains some pointless nudity. In this case, it's Monster in the Closet, a tongue-in-cheek horror comedy that's probably most famous today for featuring a very young Paul Walker. The film introduces us to a goofy-looking monster that lives inside people's closets and has been going on a killing spree. Amid the carnage, however, is a gratuitous shower scene where actor Stella Stevens is seen topless. A long shot allows viewers to gaze all they want as Stevens turns back and forth.
It's incredible.
Stevens was known back in the 1950s and 60s for starring in family-friendly fare like The Nutty Professor and The Courtship of Eddie's Father. But she wasn't new to on-camera nudity, having done nude scenes earlier in her career, as far back as Sam Peckinpah's The Ballad of Caleb Hogue in 1970. What's strange about Monster in the Closet isn't just that it's there a PG rating despite the nude scene, but that the scene actually appears on the movie's poster. Add to the fact that Monster in the Closet was made in 1986, 2 years after the first use of PG-13, and it's even more befuddling.